all the same, and they all have the same limitations. And that study showed that larger language models are actually less reliable. So the new, the larger models tend to give an apparently sensible yet wrong answer much more often, including errors on difficult questions that human supervisors frequently overlook. Okay, so we need to be extremely prudent with regard to how we use them. It's not all difficult to understand what is missing. So us as epistemic agents endowed with cognitive faculties, we have many different kind of modules in the way that we work cognitively speaking, right? So yes, we have our senses, and sometimes we're confronted with a difficult problem, and we will actually try to reason our way through, right? So we know some basic rules or principles, we know some rule of logic. So you would say rightly that we're not very good at it very often, and that's true. Okay, so that should be taken on board. We're verifiable as thinker and reasoner, but under the right circumstances, we can still do it, right? Either individually or very often collectively, right? With others, we deliberate, exchange reasons, and so on. Let's say that we know that there's a causal law that obtains, right? That exists. We can apply it, right, to try to solve a problem. We know we were able to do logical reasoning. In ethics, we can reason either from abstract principles, say equal dignity of all humans, and we can try to sort out what are the implications of that basic principle. And sometimes we're very limited, but we deliberate with others, right? Or we can apply theories like, Kantian deontology or utilitarianism or Aristotle's virtue ethics, right? So we have many resources. But in other contexts, we don't reason at all, but we have what we call common sense, right? And it's about sometimes, you have an intuition of what's the right thing to do. You didn't really think it through, but you know that, it would be totally inappropriate if I would start tango dancing here. And the first reason would be that I cannot tango dance anyway, but even if I could, right, that would be inappropriate. I don't need to think about it. And my hypothesis is that what is lacking is genuine embodiment for AI system, right? Our cognitive functions are actually, embodied, right? They're literally, of course, the brain produces, is required to produce them, but the brain, that's part of our body. It's connected, to, our entire body through the nervous system, and our body put us in touch with the world also, right? So we're embodied and we're embedded also in both natural and cultural environment, and we make our way through, trying to make sense of what's going on with our faculty, but by always being embodied and embedded in this larger environment. And that's not at all how AI systems work. And some would say, well, okay, there's nothing magical about that piece of matter, whatware that we have here, but I don't know, it evolved through, our long biological history with that aim to survive, to reproduce, and so on. And it's not clear that, silicon and chips and so on, all the hardware required to run computer programs, that they have the same kind of properties, right? And dispositions and so on. So embodied cognition might be one of the basic reasons why AGI is not fully achievable, but we'll see, right? It's an open question. Okay, so maybe one more point for those who know more about how AI is being designed now. I don't have time to go into the details, but my hypothesis at this point is that, of course, researchers are very well aware of these limitations, and they're trying to come up with answers, say, to the confabulation problems and the overfitting problem and so on. But what they do is they come up with, kind of interventions, kind of post hoc, to try to limit the propensity to confabulate or hallucinate or say inappropriate things and so on. But it's not addressing the basic limitations. So one popular approach is it's reinforcement learning from human feedback. Okay, so you train your large language model, then all the outputs is actually submitted to human assessors, and the human assessors evaluate the quality of the output, right? Thumbs up, thumbs down, okay? And from that learning, there are patterns in the human answers, and then it's fed back into the training, and the AI learns from the feedback given by humans, okay? So that's quite helpful in terms of limiting the number of errors or offensive language and so on. But that's not a perfect fix, right? And you see human users always finding ways to, make the AI say things that it shouldn't, or it doesn't eliminate the confabulation problem, right? That's not how. And that's one of the most sophisticated approach. And my hypothesis now is that all these approaches are just kind of patches, and they're not addressing the fundamental limitation. Okay, so given how they work and how they are being deployed, these are. Maybe it's not comprehensive, but these are the main problems that AI ethicists are working on now. And here again, I've talked so far about what we could call the epistemic limitations, right? Is it capable of generating, say, true or accurate, rigorous answers and content or predictions? But these epistemic limitations create also ethical risk, potential harms, and so on. And these are what we're working on with our teams now. And one of these most basic limitation is what is called the explainability problem, or the black box problem. When you look at the deep artificial neural networks, even if you're the one who programmed it, you cannot say, okay, the AI came up with that prediction, that person should not have bail, because the risks are too high. You cannot look at the code and say, okay, here are the reasons, and the human can see if the reasons are acceptable or not. It's not there in the code. It's too complex. Even experts cannot extract explanations for the AI outputs, right? So that's extremely worrisome if you're going to use them in these high-stake context, right? If the AI diagnoses you with a life-threatening disease, you want to make sure that the diagnosis is accurate, right? So, but they're trying to work on explainable AI, but there's no convincing solutions yet. You all heard, I think, of the AI's fairness problem, right? It has its own, even if it doesn't have any kind of emotions and intentions and so on, it's still sometimes some biases work their way through or come with the patterns extracted from the data. Okay, so sometimes it could be for darker skin patients, or about a woman who apply for different positions, and very often these are not voluntary biases. It's not because the designer said, okay, let's discriminate against that group of people. It's just that it's learning from available data, and these data contains social tendencies, and the data comes from our past and present social practices, right? And in our social practices, there are forms of exclusions, discrimination, marginalization, and so on. And the AI picks up on these patterns, and these patterns can be discriminatory patterns, right? And then the risk is that it actually kind of systematizes let's say that a particular judge is biased against a woman, maybe other judges won't be, but if you just, automatize judgment in that case, well, in all decisions, these discriminatory biases will be at play. Okay, so it's absolutely crucial that we find ways to find these algorithmic biases and that we eliminate them. Okay, so another of these. Okay, so you see the list. It would be too long to review all of them, but of course, mis and disinformation is one of the most important ones nowadays with generative AI systems, because you can produce such apparently high quality content. So how will it be used by humans, right? I'm not concerned about AGI decided by itself that it doesn't want to be controlled by humans. Many of my very smart colleagues think that that's a real problem. I don't see that happening, but I'm concerned about how humans are actually using AI, and it's a very powerful disinformation tool. So both to create content and then to spread the content with the recommender systems that I mentioned earlier, right? So you can use AI, different kind of AIs to mislead and manipulate and deceive people. Okay, so you see these problems, again, I don't have time to review them, but these are not minor, problems. It's very significant ethical problems. And if we don't, come up with the right kind of institutional infrastructure to manage AI, it's going to create different kinds of harms that if we don't come up with the right institutional answers, I think it's too risky to deploy AI in all these contexts. Okay, so deep fakes, you heard about that. So we're working on these issues. One that is also more subtle is. So we use technology for what we call cognitive offloading all the time, right? And sometimes that's entirely rational and efficient. But we know that there's also a cost, right, to cognitive offloading when we offload a particular task to a piece of technology. So we all, I guess, rely on our GPS systems now, and we see what's the cost, right? Probably the benefits are weightier than the cost. I do find it sad that I'm unable to navigate, even in Montreal, but Montreal there are other reasons also. When I travel, I used to study the maps and trying to understand the city. Now I just blindly rely, and there's a cost, but maybe it's still worthwhile. But the fear is that cognitive offloading in some cases lead to de-skilling, right, in some crucial areas. And I'm sure that for all of you, especially given, say, this kind of post-truth condition or our epistemic crisis, it's more crucial than ever that we are all able to assess the quality of the sources, the reliability of the sources that we're consulting, and that we find ways to assess whether a particular post is actually accurate and so on. But my fear here is that with generative AI, can arrive at a kind of a new stage within the digital revolution where AI assistant would become our primary interface to pretty much everything else, right? To all the content, so that every time that we need to have access to some information, that we first go through what is called like AI agents or AI assistant. So instead of, say, using a search engine or going to the library and speaking with an expert there who can advise you, that we rely predominantly with AI, so-called AI assistants. And I think that such assistant should not become our primary interface with the world, with everything else, because of these very basic limitations. And in order for this not to happen, we need to, again, entertain, maintain, and cultivate very basic skills that will allow us to make a good use, a wise use of AIs. And concerned that if we, ask the AI, okay, so I need to come to write that piece, that letter, that paper, what have you, and you always, first ask the chatbot to generate a first draft, that you're losing something, right? It's through, confronting with the blank page, and you're writing an intro and saying, "Oh no, that's bad," and having to rewrite it, but you actually gain, some critical skills. And I worry that these some of them will atrophy, but they're still absolutely vital in our kind of informational environment. Okay, so best case scenario, we use AI as cognitive extenders that augments our basic capacities. But the fear is that we're actually going to defer too systematically to them. Okay, so it's not. I'm concluding on this. I'm not. I do not think that it's impossible to make a good use of AI systems as cognitive extenders, but we need to come up with the right institutional measures so that allow us to mitigate their basic shortcomings. And there's a movement for that, right? We came up with ethical declarations, and now there are new legal frameworks, but to move ahead much more quickly in terms of regulating these AI systems. Okay, thank you.
So thank you very much, Professor Maclure. We have time for a few questions. Hello. Hi. Thank you very much, Professor Maclure. We have time for a few questions if you want to raise your hand. Oh, we have one.
Hi, thanks very much for your talk. I'm glad you touched a little bit on the kind of social and political uses that AI can be put to, because I think a lot of the discussion is around the affordances and constraints of the AI systems themselves. What we tend to be worried about is what political and social purposes they will be defined into. But my question is about, you touched on embodiment a little bit. If we were able to embody these AI systems, they would gain more spatial positioning, they would gain more sensory apparatus, automatically be inserted into the kind of social relationality that we would need to have the kind of human normative assessments that would let us know what's appropriate and what isn't in particular cases. It sounds as if you kind of saw embodiment as one way to move in that direction. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, it's a very good question, and some of my colleagues in AI, that's their kind of line of research now. That's their basic intuition. We need to give them bodies, so perhaps they should design robots, or perhaps avatars, in digital environments, augmented reality, and so on. That would do. I think that it's a promising line of research, but I think that actually not only embodiment but life might actually be crucial in the development of these kind of multiple cognitive models that we have. So I think that if you give them an artificial body and they get to move into environments, they get to interact socially, right? We talk about care bots interacting with you see people who lost some of their autonomy and so on. I think that maybe these systems will become better because there are more different kinds of data that they have access to. But my hunch is that there's something unique about biological life, basically trying to survive in these environments. And one of the things that evolution endowed us with is consciousness, right? And consciousness is this state where we actually have subjective qualitative experience. It feels like something to be having this discussion with you now. I have this subjective experience, and that's what allows me to have explicit thoughts, or to understand what are my emotions and my drives in some cases, and so on. And as far as we know, you need to have some living, organisms are actually also conscious, right? Humans and other animals and so on. And in absence of these properties, perhaps cognition will always be limited. That's my hunch, but it's really wait and see, right? Let's develop the system and see.
Thank you very much.
On the question of AGI, I think that the proponents of that, I imagine they will claim that level of development, it will be through some sort of test, like, like, oh, it passed the bar test, and so it can be a lawyer. And we know that's not the case, even though you can train this thing, you can brute force your way to pass those tests, but then they cannot like build a case. And so, but I guess the proponent will say, like, if I fake it good enough, it kind of doesn't matter. If it is like, my question is in the philosophy world, like, are you guys working on some sort of an updated version of the Turing test, or like something that would like kind of say, like, no, you haven't achieved this, or what does it mean to do that?
Yeah, very good question also. And it's true. Very often we say, oh, see that new AI model, it got a good score at that particular standardized test, anyway, that kind of test. And well, it's impressive, but if it's standardized, it's because, it's already there in the training data, right? So it could track the patterns in the training data, and they can do well at these tests. But intelligence, one of the things that it allows us to do is to actually deal with the singular, right? With novelty. And human life, is kind of open-ended, right? The world keeps changing. The natural world keeps changing. The social world is always changing all the time. So we're always dealing with singularity in the sense that there's element of novelty in a human life. And I don't see how you cope with this radical kind of singularity based on that approach. So I'm not sure that fake it until you can do it. I don't see how it can be done unless there's a paradigmatic shift in how AI is actually done, and I am not seeing it because brute force, as you said, won't get us there, I think.
I think we have time for one more question.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'd like to know, in the process of and interacting with AI, you sort of said that we should steer away from assuming or associating human attributions with AI when we interact with it. So I'd like to know what strategies are in place for us to engage with AI to avoid attributing human qualities.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So it's very tempting, right? Sometimes we anthropomorphize objects, artifacts that are not human-like at all, right? Apparently some people talk to their car. I don't, but I heard that it's something that some people do. So it's tempting to us to do it. It's built in our psychology, but I think that one of the policies that we should use is to always see them as tools and basically as computer programs, okay? Because AI, that's already a form of anthropomorphism, right? To call these systems, like to see them as intelligent systems having intelligence. So let's not forget that it's always code and that you always need the hardware, like the computers. And that these are, there are colleagues who call them stochastic parrots, right? So they track these wide correlations and then they kind of repeat them to new cases. So that's a bit pejorative, but that's advanced statistics, basically, okay, with clever, software engineering and so on. So yeah, see them as tools, as computer programs, as statistical machine. And I think that helps. helps, but the corporation don't have any interest in limiting that propensity that we have, right? And science fiction doesn't help. Like I love the movie Her. I think that's one of the best movies in the past decade. But then everyone thinks about AI in this way, and that's not helping understanding, what they can do.
Pressing questions, because if not, we could do some tango and then go to break. Okay, thank you very much, Professor.